I got extra because they said they were going to be still changing around once I got a list, so I don't know.
Will permitting with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have an executive meeting prior to the meeting tonight for personnel. That reflected in the minutes. Are there any comments on agenda items? Any comments on agenda items? Okay. Item 5, Superintendent's report.
I'm asking for a motion to approve items 1 through 3 on the regular agenda and items 1 through 7 on the supplemental agenda. Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Can I
Roll
just
call.
thank
Yes.
Kathy Chappell, I mean, her resignation's in here, and thank her for just everything that she's contributed, and also, you know, we really threw her into a new situation this year, and she rose to the occasion, and I appreciate that. So.
Thank you. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Dr. Pravola?
Yes.
Mr. Swilly?
Yes.
Mr. Widener?
Yes.
Mr. Burke? Yes. Mrs. Arnold? Yes. Mr. Park?
Yes. Committee reports. Were there any committees? Mr. Boboa.
If I may, from the extracurricular standpoint, I've been asked, and I just want to let the school board know, I talked to Mr. Bosher, there have been some requests for, over the summer, maybe using the facilities. However, due to the summer program, I think we're still in agreement that we're going to keep the campuses closed on Sunday for any extracurricular activities. So I just want that for the record, and that's my recommendation. I don't think we have to vote on anything, just to communicate to the community, because of the summer program, keeping the Sunday closed campus is the way to go.
Right, at least until the end of June, it is. I don't know what the DOH recommendations are going to look like at the end of June, because the masking order is going to be over. So I'm not really sure, but I would say yes until.
But until we hear,
Yes.
I guess what I'm saying,
Yeah.
we would have to change our guidelines, and what
Yeah.
I'm saying to communicate to the coaches in the community, campus is closed officially on Sunday still.
Right. I agree. And the other thing I would add to that is we have to do a new health and safety plan. It's part of that ESSERS 3, the ESSERS 3 application. So you guys will get a chance to see it and everything, but that is like going into next year. So they're expecting us to change.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else you wanted to report on?
No,
I didn't mean to skip over you.
no, that's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to, I really think graduation is coming together, and I really think that it's going to be a lovely ceremony, and that this is a really special group of kids. And thank you to Todd, thank you to John and his staff for pulling everything together, and the teachers and the support staff at the high school. I think it's going to be memorable. So, look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow night.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Unfinished business. We have 4 board policies for second reading and approval. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
What was the biggest change of the volunteers from the old policy, I guess?
I let Carolyn handle that one. The biggest change for volunteers.
We added in that guest volunteer.
Okay, so that's the only
like
change?
a speaker or somebody that would come
Okay.
in, that they,
Okay.
that's pretty much the only thing that has changed at all.
Okay.
Anything else? Roll call.
Mrs. Gregory? Yes. Dr. Pravola?
Yes.
Mr. Swilly?
Yes.
Mr. Widener?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Arnold? Yes. Mr. Park?
Yes. Okay, item 2 is the 21-22 district budget. And I believe folks have, administration has provided us with budgets showing a 0 mil increase, a 1 mil increase, and a 2 mil increase.
I have a couple slides that I'd like to share. So Phil, just so you know, this is going to be bright. All right, so I'm going to try and keep this brief. We have had many conversations over the last couple of months regarding our proposed budget and where we're at currently. This is the timeline that we're working against. Tonight we are seeking approval of the final budget. And a couple of things that I was asked to provide for tonight. So during the last review, we talked a little bit about enrollment and the impact of expenses per ADM, which is your daily membership. We have enrollment numbers. I was asked to show simultaneously what the teacher trends have been in the district over the last several years. So in this case, what I did was I took the enrollment data that is typically provided at the beginning of September on the board book for public reference. And I also looked at, I took the payroll data that was provided to look at the number of teachers that we had at a comparable time period. So this really looks at like September roughly, beginning of September of each year. And what you can see is that we have seen declining trends in both. And the delta from the number of students over that 7-year time period is about 430, I believe 433 students. And the reduction of teachers is, I believe, 24 teachers during a comparable time frame. Now that is not total staff, so there have been other changes that have occurred to total staff, which are significant. So that would look at everything from maintenance staffing to cafeteria staffing, custodial staffing, and paraprofessionals. But the data that I'm showing here is specifically teachers for your reference. So as Mr. Farr referenced, there are 3 proposals that you have in front of you for consideration tonight. One would be a 0 mil tax increase, one would be 1 mil, one would be 2 mil. During the last meeting, I was asked what the adjusted index was for this year. I do have that information. So the adjusted index was 3.6%. So when you do the math, what that equates to is a 2.808 millage increase. So the maximum that we could raise taxes for the coming year would be 2.808. And based on historical trend, we provided the 0, 1, and 2 mil because that is traditionally what the board has requested for consideration when we take a look at the final budget approval. So as a reminder, this is what our historical tax rates have been in mills over the last several years. The last 2 years have remained flat at 78, and so when you do the math, 3.6% of 78 is where you get the 2.808 mills. That's the maximum that we could increase going into the coming year. Shared this slide as well last time, so this shows where we have been at and what the impact is. Christine shared some data that the actual median household assessment right now is at 28,000, so we used 30,000 for the purposes of this exercise, really just as an example. There really isn't a significant change from the most recent data that we've received. And really what this shows is that during that period of time from 2016 through 2021, the average median household would have seen about a $90 tax increase during that period of time. So that's the last slide that I have. The comment that I would make is, as we have continued these conversations, I think the way that I could summarize it best is to say that I think as a district, we have some challenges that lie ahead as we figure out how to strategically position the district to be a district of excellence and to be able to do that within the cost parameters that we have laid out. And the way I would describe it is I would say that this is not an either or an or conversation. This isn't about you either raise taxes or you shed costs. I think the reality of where we're at is that it's an and conversation. And so I think in order for us to continue to move forward with the objectives that we have in terms of the curriculum offerings, the extracurriculars that we are committed to in this district, as well as the educational goals that we have in this district, I think we are going to have to look at both of those avenues continuously over the coming years. So that is what I have for this evening, and now I will turn it back to you as a board to make a motion for which proposal you'd like to consider this evening.
Shane, could you just go back to the slide?
Sure.
We've only raised taxes 3 mills in the last 3 years, is that correct?
Yeah,
17, 18, so
yeah,
it's been a total from 75, actually 4 years, right?
right.
So, and I think historically, we have to remember that consolidation was a big part of that. The discussions that we had about consolidation was the savings. I think this year, and I'm going to ask the question, the ESSER dollars for the education, the recovery, everything this year, salaries, I mean, that's outside of the budget. Am I correct?
So in the coming year, we did include ESSER 2 in the projection. So on the revenue side, ESSER 2, 1.9 million is included, and the projected costs that we see associated, and again, those are assumptions, those are included in there as well. So that's a wash, exactly. But we did not include any of ESSER 3. Now, we can apply for ESSER 3 in the coming year, but at this point, we felt like that was a little bit further down the road, and so we have not committed to how those funds would be
And
spent.
the reason I say that is I think the community hears that we're getting this money. We all have to understand that it's already almost earmarked
Correct.
for spending.
And what I would say is a large portion of that is what is committed for the summer program. So, as we look ahead to the summer program, which we have pulled together with absolute excellence, and what we have, to offer, I think, is, hands down, a top-notch program. That there are costs associated with that, and the way that we are able to fund that is through ESSER 2.
And our platform, cyber platform, we've already spent the money and built that. That is, we are prepared with that. So there's not an anticipated or unexpected cost going into that.
Well, we did budget some money for that, because there are going to have to be.
But it's still allotted for. I guess what I'm asking is
Correct.
there's no anticipated surprises. Crazy thing like COVID, we never expected that. But the reality is I'm just trying to get a handle on, listen, in today's day and age, there's nobody on this board that wants to raise taxes, we get it. But when you start looking at financial projections, it depends on how much of a deficit you want to run.
Correct.
That's pretty
That's
much
right.
what we're looking at. How much money do we want to lose?
That's right.
You want to lose a lot and not raise taxes? Because then I said this at the last meeting. I talked to people in the community, it's like, hey, don't raise taxes. But then the question is, well, tell me what programs you want to cut.
Correct.
And who do you want to get rid of employee-wise? I mean, look, it's a simple business decision, not a moral decision that's easy, but a business decision. And the answer is nobody wants to cut anything.
Right.
So, it's a difficult situation. And I think the point here is we haven't raised taxes significantly in those years. So I just want to bring that to the boards and the community's attention.
I'll add just a couple things from a financial perspective. We talked about this one of these meetings ago. Shane and I started to take a look at what a projected longer term budget looks like. So what's that picture out through fiscal year 24 to 25? And even though we drop off the bond days, we're still currently projected to be running anywhere between $2 and $3 million deficit. And so that's where this comment that Shane made around that it's not an either or. It's going to be an and. We're going to have to do some amount of cutting as well as slightly the tax rates, depending on what the board's budget looks like. They do suggest, generally from a training perspective, carry about a 10% fund balance of what your expenditures are. And so with us running that $50 to $1 million type of budget, in general, it should be around this $5 million. So regardless of which option you choose, we're going to dip into that a little bit lower than that projected 10% ideal. So that's going to be in there. And then the last thing is just from a school funding perspective, which is sort of what Bill said. We do get 50% of our revenue from local sources, which means property taxes. So until that gets changed, if we don't raise taxes at some point, some amount, those revenues just don't go up. And so as we try to account for raises across our staff, programs and things like that, that puts us in a real bind. I was looking for the slide, I don't have it in front of me, so Shane or Christine may add this. Over those last 5 years where we were doing consolidation and things like that, in general, we've held that expenditure line constant throughout that period of time. And that's a major feat, because ideally, you'd like to see that go down, but we're still accounting for 2 to 3% type of raises, health insurance increases, all those sorts of things that are those fixed costs. And so we're now at the point where, I think we need to talk about which one of those we want to choose and try to minimize that damage. And so I said this before, we want to try to avoid a crisis, so doing this early is helpful, because we don't want to be in a position where we're trying to do a 6 or 7% increase and go into referendum later in a crisis situation. Thank you.
I see where you're all coming, and I've done this a lot of years. My issue is, my personal problem is, we're putting up a budget where it's gonna be $19,940 per student a year. Nobody else does that. Nobody in the valley does that. You correct me if I'm wrong, John. But
Yeah,
that's
there
an awful lot around here.
There was a slide, Bill, it was last meeting or the meeting before. We're about that 19,000, and so Wyalusing was 19.5, Trail was like
Trail was-
18-ish.
Yeah.
And so we're high, but we're not nearly as high as what I would have expected. And those were 18, 19 numbers, and so it's actually pretty likely that with us holding that line flat on expenditures, that some of those other schools for this upcoming year would be greater than us. Your point is right on, though, Bill. I mean, we spend a lot of money per student. We're not actually as far out of line as what I thought we were before Shane ran those numbers. Because I think, Bill, you asked for that after that last meeting. And so that, it is a problem. I was listening to the news somewhere, and it was a New York City school, and I think they're like 25 or 30,000 per student, something crazy, compared to ours, which still is very, very high. You always feel like you could take your students somewhere and do that in a way that would be less. But if you look at where we spend our money, realistically, one of the big areas is the special education budget. Our regular programs are somewhere, I may have these numbers wrong, so correct me. I want to say probably $11-12 million on the regular programs, and then special was 7 to 8. And those numbers may be, they're somewhere in that ratio between them. And so that really ends up being a big expenditure for us, is we're trying to provide good programs for all of our students. And so that number ends up being high, but I think a lot of that's because of our demographic. Also the transportation, when Shane did that comparison to Dallas and Abington Heights, their transportation budget was half of what we are based on our size. And so there's definitely some structural problems there that we're dealt that maybe some of these other local schools may not have. But we were in the ballpark of Wyalusing and Trail, and I was surprised about that, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, the costs that we have difficulty controlling, one, pension costs are controlled by Harrisburg, not us. Healthcare costs, we know our own employment healthcare costs have gone up and very difficult to control. And that's contractual in our contract with our employees. And the employee wage costs are in the contracts too, which are some of the challenges when it comes to that. So the only way to reduce those costs are then to reduce the number of employees. So it's only challenging nut to tackle.
I've said this in previous meetings, and I have committed to saying it in every meeting when we're talking about the budget. If we raise taxes 3 mills, we'll probably make up close to what we're losing from the Procter & Gamble and Walmart appeals of their taxes. So we're not even looking at a 3 mill raise, and that's not all happening in just this year. But that's going to be a significant hit to the tune of several $100,000 a year that is going to compound year after year after year. So we would probably have to raise taxes at least 2, if not 3 mills to make up for that loss. So we're still going to be going in on a deficit on that end, even if it was a 1 or 2 mill increase this year.
And if you go to certain parts of the state, for instance down in Lancaster area or Kutztown where my daughter went to school, they're seeing considerable building going on, new construction, and that pushes their tax revenue up because of the new construction. Clearly around here, we don't have much new construction. That's not even close to what we're seeing here, so we don't see a natural growth in our tax base. So that brings us back to relying on the tax base that we have. Anybody else?
One last thing is, and I think John mentioned this, until there's a change in the funding, the way schools are funded, and we make a significant portion of our budget from property taxes. So until the people of our community put pressure on their politicians to effect change, we're going to keep doing this. And the last thing is, yeah, this is going to be, in my opinion, the start of some difficult conversations moving forward, because I think Shane said it, it's not just raising taxes or raising revenue, it's about how we cut. I mean, that's the way it is, how we look at, maybe a short, curt word of cut, but that's the reality of it. And I think we're going to be facing some decisions just because the way the funding is changing, like to Holly's point, what do we lose, $600-some thousand?
Yeah.
Roughly, yeah.
So 600-some thousand, so our 2 mil is not.
Doesn't even make up for what we
Doesn't make it up.
Right, so we lost 600+ thousand from 2 big companies / employers in our community, but that's the way it is.
And as John said, half is local money, and the other half comes from primarily Harrisburg state money, and that's been essentially flat the last couple of years, I believe. So they're not helping with the natural increases that we're seeing just simply from inflation. Do we have a motion?
Make the motion for 2 mills.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Two mills. Okay, roll call, please.
Dr. Favola?
Well, in my heart, I'm against it, I'm voting yes.
Mr. Swilly?
No.
Mr. Widener?
No.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett? No. Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Farr?
Yes. Motion passes. 5-3. Thank you, everyone. I know that's not an easy decision to make. Moving on to new business. We have items 1 through 5. Is there a motion to do items 1 through 5? Or would someone like to split something out?
Do I have to split out number 2? I mean, I'm not gaining anything from it.
We're not paying you anything, are we?
Right.
Okay, I don't think so.
It would be like going to the polls and not
Right.
voting for yourself. Why?
Right, well, I mean,
No.
Yep. Motion 1 through 5.
Motion 1 through 5.
Second.
A second. Any discussion?
Bill, I just want to make it a point to let the public know, number 1 on new business for approving a parental request for 2 students to go to Sullivan County. We have done that yearly in the past, just because it's 5 miles over 18 miles for schooling.
Yeah, we don't have a bus that goes that far out.
Right,
And the biggest item of that is there's no access from the Tunkhannock side,
correct.
so.
Yep.
Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Dr. Favola?
Yes.
Mr. Swilly?
Yes.
Mr. Widener?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Gregory? Yes. Mrs. Arnold? Yes. Mr. Farr?
Yes. Okay. Any other comments?
Motion to adjourn.